The one thing I'm stressed out is to figure out the age of it again.
Extra credit sheet that we do on that question is on Blackboard, so Monday. So I'm typically your class. So that'd be great. And then I'm hoping I'll get that weekly skills check posted tonight. I haven't had a chance to look at the questions yet, so that should do it pretty soon. And we are starting chapter 10. Yay. And we're only spending 2 days on chapter 10. Yay. And there's a whole bunch in chapter 10 that we're not even going to cover. So.
Yay! Now we're excited.
It is. It's one of those where there's a lot of overlap, though, with some of the biochemistry, especially what do they call it? They call it neurophysiology or neurobiology?
Neurophys.
Okay. A lot of overlap with that, so we're not going to do a whole lot with it in here. Okay, but we do have to talk a little bit about membrane transport. When we're talking about transport, this is movement of metabolites across a cell membrane. And there's a couple of different kinds of diffusion. So there's non-mediated diffusion. And this is travel of, we'll say, small molecules across the membrane. Unassisted. To achieve basically equilibrium. Okay, there are some things that can do this, there are some things that can't. This is only small, nonpolar molecules really that can do this, just can cross the membrane. I think there was a question in the activity about that.
Yep.
Try to figure out which things were not considered polar. Oxygen may have fooled you a little bit.
Hey, cholesterol is small.
Cholesterol is very hydrophobic. Small compared to proteins, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would consider cholesterol to be a small molecule. I know that you're thinking in organic terms and it looks huge, right? But in the biochemistry world, cholesterol is pretty darn small. But it's non-polar. So cholesterol is very hydrophobic, and so it can get into that lipid bilayer pretty easily, and it can cross it. If you're very hydrophilic, polar, you can't cross the membrane because of that barrier. The hydrophobic things frequently can, and that's actually good for us because cholesterol, like I mentioned before, it's the starting material for synthesizing all the other steroid hormones, and all those hormones, in order to act upon their receptors, which are usually nuclear receptors, have to be able to cross membranes, otherwise they can't do their job. Okay, so non-mediated diffusion is just on its own, and then we have mediated diffusion. And this is passive transport of molecules with assistance. And again, to achieve equilibrium. So it's always going to go with a concentration gradient. You can think of it that way, with a concentration gradient. So there's some mechanism in place to help the things get across the membrane, but they cross completely based on concentration. It's concentration outside the cell, concentration inside the cell. If you got high concentration here, it's going to want to move to the low concentration on the other side. And so that's mediated diffusion and specifically passive. Okay. And then, and so a lot of these terms get kind of mixed up and turned around, but active transport, which is not passive. This is also mediated. So there's a mechanism in place to make this happen, and requires energy. To move molecules against a concentration gradient. Yes?
Is there any difference between mediated and facilitated diffusion?
You can call it the same thing, yeah. So if you want to say this is facilitated.
Sorry, it's just the online question.
Yeah. Same thing. Something helps. So both mediated or facilitated is something out there helps it happen. Okay. Frequently when we look at the things that do active transport, we usually call them POPs. So what drives passive diffusion? And that is mediated and non-mediated.
I don't know. So just, we call active transport diffusion still?
No, it's no longer diffusion. Yeah, because it's, yeah, when you talk about diffusion, it's always areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. That's the movement. As soon as it's, sorry?
We call something else by chance?
What do you want to call it?
I don't know.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it diffusion. I personally wouldn't want to call it that. That'd be very weird because it means, I like these definitions. I don't know if the book does something different, but diffusion I see is always with a concentration gradient. Transport I always consider against. Although we're going to see some passive transporter proteins where they call them transporters, and personally I don't like that terminology, but we're going to have to live with it because that's what the world calls it. Stick the word active in front of transport, I will always know what you mean. Okay, so what drives it? We need to know how to calculate a free energy of transport. Okay, so that's our free energy of transport. Is equal to RT natural log of the concentration of A inside, whatever you define inside to be, over the concentration of A outside, whatever you define outside to be, plus Z of A, and if you see a little F there, delta psi. So delta G, this is my partial molar free energy of transport. Okay, because we're really looking at this for one species, so this is what I said, partial. Okay. This accounts for both chemical and electrical potentials that will drive our diffusion. this term here is our chemical potential. And then the second term is our electrical potential. Okay, so Z of A, guesses on that one? What is Z usually? Charge. Yep, so this is our charge on A, species A. Okay. So note, if uncharged, what happens to that whole term? Goes away. So if uncharged, then chemical potential is equal to 0.
You mean electrical potential?
Oh, electric, what is, sorry, thank you. Our fancy little script F there is Faraday's constant. This is one that I'm not going to make you memorize. So I can never remember it. 96,485 coulombs per mole. And then delta psi is our membrane potential. And that's equal to whatever the potential in is minus the potential out. Okay. It's very difficult for us to measure those, but we can measure the difference between them. So basically, because I can stick an electrode on either side of the membrane and measure the voltage difference between them in the delta psi. And that is in, so this is our electrical potential across the membrane, measured in volts. And remember that 1 volt, so if you want your units to all cancel out, 1 volt is 1 joule per coulomb. For a cell, if we're considering a cell, where this is cytosol, or this is cytosol, and this is the outside cell. If this is negative, if it has a negative potential, or negative, let's say, sorry, net charge, then you will have a negative membrane potential. So if you've got lots of negatives out here and you have lots of positives here, then the membrane potential that you get is a negative. If it's more negative than it is outside. Alright, so example. Membrane potential is equal to negative 70 millivolts, which is a really common one. And my calcium ion concentration, and don't let me throw you that little 2 pluses means plus 2 for calcium. Concentration inside is equal to 50 millimolar. And my calcium ion concentration outside is equal to 150 millimolar. degrees C, body temperature. Which way will calcium want to diffuse? And you always have to be careful in questions like this because what you want to do, rather than calculate anything, is to look at this and say that, oh, outside is 150 and inside is only 50, it's going to want to go inside. But that's ignoring your electrical potential. So you always have to double check and make sure the electrical potential agrees with that, because it might actually force it to go the other direction, depending on what that potential is. Okay, so if I fill everything out, I have my delta sugar transport for A, which is now for calcium. So if we wanted to, we can make this our calcium. Is equal to R. What is R? Yeah, 8.314 joules per mole Kelvin. That's what you should know. And my temperature, which hopefully needs to be in Kelvin.
37 plus 256.
273 plus
37.
310 Kelvin. Natural log, and I have my two concentrations there, and that needs to be what we're defining as in on top, and what we're defining as outside. Normally that's going to be inside and outside like you would normally think of it, but every once in a while, depending what you're looking at, they might define it the other way, especially if they are looking at organelles inside a cell, and you're looking at the membrane of the organelle. They might actually define the inside as inside the organelle and on the cytosol, and then sometimes you get kind of flipped around. Okay, but we're just talking about a cell membrane, and it's simple here. And so we said it was 50 inside, and millimolar, and it was 150 outside millimolar. It doesn't really matter on your units there as long as they match. And then that is going to be plus, add all this to my second term, and my Z is what? Plus 2. And third is constant is 96,485 coulombs per mole times my membrane potential. Now it's given as negative 70 millivolts, and you do have to convert that to volts in order to get everything to cancel, right? So this is a negative 0.070 volts, but to cancel my units, that's joules per coulomb. And so my delta G is going to equal what? Negative 16,300 some odd balls. I'm going to say 16.3 kilojoules per mole. You happy with that? Yeah. So I should have gotten 16,300 something. Now that actually is two different terms. If I split that out into my two different terms for my chemical and my electrical, it's a negative 2.8 kilojoules per mole, and again into that a minus 13.5 kilojoules per mole. So I can say that both the electrical and chemical potentials are driving calcium in the same direction, which is going to be where?
Into the cell.
for the inside, right? Because I have more outside than inside. They're both driving them inside. So more negative inside than outside, so I'm going to try to move some of that positive charge on the outside to the inside to get everything to balance. It's negative. What does the negative sign on free energy terms mean? Spontaneous. Okay, that means that that is the way it's going. I defined my in and out right. If you get it backwards, if it ends up being positive, then that's not spontaneous, and my calcium is not going to want to go into the inside. Okay, it's going to want to stay on the outside instead. So, if you get a positive delta G, then whatever A is will not want to move whatever we're calling the inside, because we're looking at it where it is being out, going in, and then, you know, it's going the wrong way. Now, all you just flip your terms, flip them over, and then it's negative, and it's going to want spontaneously go the other direction. Yeah.
How did you get the negative 2.8, negative 13.5?
Those are, this one, I think this one was my chemical potential, and that was my electrical potential.
How do you know that?
That's the two terms. So the first term is your chemical potential,
Oh,
and the
okay.
second term is your electrical. Sorry.
Is it possible chemical potential will be like positive and electrical is negative? I mean, is it mostly like
Electrical potential could be positive. Yeah. And your chemical potential could be negative, and it just depends which one's the bigger term as to which one wins.
So it doesn't really matter which direction they are, it matters like what is your outcome
So if your free energy is positive, it's not going to want to go the direction that you set it up as. Okay.
So the reason why the negative change in G tells us it's going inside is because the membrane potential is changing?
Yeah, the way this is set up, when we set up this problem and we do the in to the out, this assumes we're moving calcium from out to in when you set it up this way. And that's why you put the in on the top and the out on the bottom. That actually references the direction that we want things to move. So it's out to in. And that's what comes up from calculations. So if it does want to move from out to in, then it'll be negative. And if it doesn't, it'll be positive.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so when will transport stop? I should say net. So when will we see no more net diffusion of calcium, which probably would have to be mediated because it's positively charged? Yes, yes. Okay, when your delta G of transport is equal to 0, okay, and then if we set that to our two terms, our RT natural log of RA in over A out, those are Z of A, Faraday's constant, delta psi. And then if we move that around, if we just subtract like that entire term here, then that is going to be when the negative A Faraday delta psi is equal to an RT natural log of A in, A out. Okay. So this is when your potential terms are equal but opposite. Potentials are equal but opposite in sign. and then my net flow will stop. So if we go back to our other example, what membrane potential will we observe at equilibrium? Okay, and again, that's where our net transport has stopped. So think of it as forward reaction, reverse reaction, or equal rates. So go ahead and try to crunch that line right now.
Like, so is it, 0.019?
Yes.
0.0146.
Yes. I'm gonna change it to millivolts. Millivolts. Positive.
Yes.
Anybody else get that? I hope you got it.
Yes.
Just be careful with your units.
When I type things incorrectly, yes.
So this is a negative 8.314 joules per mole Kelvin. 310 Kelvin. Natural log. 50 millimolar, 150 millimolar. Is equal to a plus 2. And I'm sorry, I just swapped that, and that's really mean. It doesn't really matter which side you put the negative sign on, as long as they're equal but opposite. Does anyone even notice that I did that?
Yes.
Yes. Would you like me to move it to the other side for consistency? Sure. You can put a negative in front of that. How about that? How about I just write it out exactly like I wrote it out before? That would be better. Here you go. 96,485 coulomb, and then I'm looking for a this. Okay, so I'm solving for that. And it has to equal 8.314 joules per mole Kelvin, and 310 Kelvin times the natural log of 50 millimolar divided by 150 millimolar. Barely put on the page there. Okay. And you solve for your delta equilibrium, so divide the whole thing. 8.314 joules per mole Kelvin. 310 Kelvin. Natural log. 50 divided by 150.
What? I didn't do that.
Divided to 96,485.
So I was like, oh, geez. That's what.
Joules per coulomb, sorry.
would the concentrations be changing if we're actually going to equilibrium? Like, isn't the question actually like what membrane potential would, for these
Yeah.
concentrations,
Yeah.
keep it at equilibrium?
The question is more, what would the membrane potential have to be so that you saw no net
Yes,
flow at 50 and
yes.
150?
Okay.
Yes.
So we're changing your concentrations.
So, it's the, yeah, no, because what you're asking is a much harder question.
Yeah.
Much harder to calculate. So I shouldn't say when will it stop, I should say when will net transport not happen,
Yeah.
and that will solve that little problem there.
Okay.
So what membrane potential do you see no transport, even though you've got different concentrations and you have this chemical potential, you say? Yeah. I asked that question once on an exam on accident. Maybe it was on purpose. Where you had to figure out how it was changing as it was, yes, and it was very new. And it took me hours to figure it out myself when I realized I had messed up. No. So there's no way I was going to have that.
You didn't get it right?
There were some noble attempts.
So no.
Okay, just one more thing. This is not a resting potential. Okay? If you're a biology student and you know what a resting potential is, this is not it. Okay? If you've never heard of a resting potential either, then maybe we should just not go there. Okay? Well, resting potentials, you're talking about nerve cells and what potential the nerve cells at rest, which actually is not where there's no net flow. It is actually at something where there is quite a bit of chemical and electrical potential there. So this is not a resting potential, this is an equilibrium potential where you don't see any net flow of a particular ion going back to the resting membrane. All right. So for calcium is very positively charged. Calcium is not something that will want to cross a cell membrane unassisted and mediated. And so we're going to look at types of mediated, passive, and this is where your book calls it transport. Because it's passive, I like to say diffusion instead. And you can say it either way as long as the word passive is in front of it. I don't know either. So, mediated, passive. And there are types of, if you want to call it facilitators, or mediators, or if we have to, we'll say transporters. All from the same thing. There are 5 of them, kind of 5 classes. So there are ionophores, there are porins, there are ion channels, there are aquaporins, and then there are transport proteins. Okay, we're only going to do the first one today, and because I want to make sure we do have enough time for the activity. So we will save the others for next time, and what we're not going to talk about are the active transports. We will briefly look at potassium sodium pumps, and then that's it for the actives. All right, so when ionophores. Okay, these allow diffusion of ions across the membrane. Since membrane potentials are affected by ions, these are frequently antibiotic. In nature. So we're going to look at a couple examples, and these examples that we're looking at are they're actually antibiotics. So you can get them from one microorganism or a fungus, and then they can kill other bacteria, basically by messing up their membrane potentials, because you're going to scramble your ion concentrations across the membrane. There are two types. I'll get all of our subtypes in here. So there are carrier ionophores. And these bind an ion on one side of the membrane, and then they diffuse to the other side to release the ion. So they carry the ion across the membrane. And then there are channel ionophores. And these create a channel through which ions can flow. Across your membrane. In the cartoony version, okay, carrier ionophore binds on one side, and then the whole thing diffuses across, and is basically just protecting that charged species from your hydrophobic environment. Diffuses across, and then it lets go on the other side. And binding of these things is completely based on concentration gradients, because this is passive diffusion. So you can just as easily bind it on this side and carry it over to the other side. Channel formers make some sort of tunnel all the way across the membrane, and then the ion can get through. Okay, so those are types. If you consider the structures of these things, what would you expect to be sticking out on the outside of the carrier? Hydrophobic stuff, yes. And then on the inside? Hydrophilic. The channel on the outside?
Hydrophobic.
Yep, and down the middle?
Hydrophilic.
Hydrophilic. So we have two examples we're going to talk about. One, your book used to talk about it in the older edition, and the new edition doesn't. So example of a carrier ionophore is linomycin. It is a cyclic peptide, and that means it has no NRC terminus. It actually has a peptide bond between every single amino acid in the circle. It's cyclic, and it is composed of D and L amino acids. And there's a lot of valines in it. So valine being very hydrophobic side chain, your side chains coming out. While carbonyls point in to coordinate what it transports, which is potassium. And it's very specific for potassium because of the coordinate bond lengths. Okay, it won't transport sodium. Won't do it. So if you're looking at a periodic table, sodium's where compared to potassium?
Right below it.
Above it, which means it's bigger or smaller.
Smaller.
Smaller. Sodium's too small. It doesn't coordinate well in that binding pocket. potassium is just the perfect size, and if I go down one more, what is that? Who cares after the third row, right? Rubidium or something. It's too big and it doesn't fit. Sorry, I'm a biochemist. Everything after carbon, I don't know. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, I just don't know. So it's very specific for potassium. So here we're showing some of our D and L, and notice that they're not all 20 standards either. They do get this mixture of amino acids, and the whole thing forms a little circle. And then there's a valine side chain sticking out, so all my hydrophobic side chains stick out. And then all these carbonyls in my little peptide bond backbone, those are all pointing in, and there are 6 of them that coordinate that potassium in the middle. And potassium works, and the other ions don't. Another example, is this in the new edition of the book? I forgot to look. It was in the 2nd edition and then not in the 3rd. Is it in the 4th? Who knows? Okay, we'll talk about it in a minute. Gramacetine A is an example of a channel ionophore. And it's 2 little peptides, both of which form helices that join end on end. So when I'm looking down the center of this, when I'm looking from the top, it makes a little hole all the way through the membrane. And then, what are these guys out here? Tryptophans. Look at all those tryptophans sticking out. And then we've got some other hydrophobic things sticking out. But then notice that in my interior, that's looking more like, again, those amide peptide bond structures, some carbonyls, and so this is a more friendly environment for positively charged species. So an example of a channel ionophore is gramacetine A. This is also DNL amino acids. It also puts hydrophobics outward, including all those nice tryptophans are outward. This is not as selective though. It will allow both your potassium and your sodium through, right? Because we're not coordinating anything. And if potassium can fit through the hole, then sodium will too because it's smaller. And so it's not as selective as the amino acids. All right, that gives us 10 minutes. But this is a short activity, so I think 10 minutes is enough. So in this activity, be very careful with the definition at the top, because this is talking about a SIM port